Welcome to our monthly functional training. In today's session, we will focus on the notifications module. Today, you will learn how to take advantage of this feature. You're going to learn how to set up alerts. You're going to learn how to set up notifications for different events. Our presenter for today is Crystal Fosdick. She's our professional service consultant, and she's been in the workforce management industry for over 9 years, and she's been with the Centis for the last 2 years. And my name is Lucy Saldaña, instructional designer and moderator for today's session. I've been in the HCM industry for 15 years and with the Centis over 3 years. During our session today, before we get started, I just want to make sure that everyone who is on the call has taken the opportunity to download the 2 handouts that we have provided. One of the handouts is the PowerPoint slide for today's presentation, and the other handout that we have for you is the notifications user guide. So please make sure that you download those 2 documents and use them as an internal reference resource. That way it can help you as you start getting comfortable using this module. Another thing that I want to mention is that if during our session you have any questions, please drop those in the question inbox. As Crystal is presenting, I will be taking care of those questions that are coming in. And we know that during the registration process, you also submitted some questions, so we'll make sure we address those towards the end of our webinar. The session for today is being recorded and will be available in our go-to channel. So if after today's session you still have questions, either if it's specific to your organization or you just need assistance as far as setting up this module, if you're an Ascentis Novatime client, contact our support team at support@ascentis.com. And if you're a Novatime only client, contact our support team at support@novatime.com. Next slide. Today, we also wanted to point out just different places where you can get additional resources as far as look at documents or look at short videos. For our Ascentis clients, please visit our Ascentis community page. You can click on the help toolbar, and this will sign you directly into the communities, or you can go to the direct link provided on the slide. Next screen. For our Novatime clients, for you, since you do not have access to the Ascentis community, you can access additional resources from the help toolbar. Click on that help toolbar in the top right-hand side of the screen. It's that question mark, and this pop-up window will appear. And depending on the role in your organization, if you're an administrator, supervisor, or employee, there's different folders for you to retrieve information. Now, earlier I did mention that this recording will be posted in our go-to channel. So if you go to Chapter 8, you can access our channel through there, or you can click on this link provided on the slides. All right, let's go to the next slide. Before I turn it over to Crystal, I do want to mention that at the end of our training today, we do have a survey that we're going to be sending out to you. We want you to know that your feedback is really important and that we hear you. This session is a direct result of the feedback that you have provided us. You told us you wanted to see information on notifications, and this is why we have this particular webinar. So we ask that you take 2 minutes, complete those survey, and continue to provide us feedback. That way we can better design the future of our webinars. All right, so just wanted to say thank you to all, and now I'm going to turn it over to Crystal, who is our presenter for today. Crystal, take it away.
All right, thank you. Last part of the slides we'll go through today is just for the agenda, and then I'm going to head over to the system and we'll go through each of these sections independently. So the agenda for today is what are notifications? What are they programmed to do, and basically how do we program them? Where we enable the different sections for turning on the notifications. We're going to look at some of the basic configuration requirements and rules as you are building those different notifications. And then lastly, how do we check for notification events to make sure that they've ran successfully when they're scheduled to run next, or to force them to run immediately upon clicking a button? So basically, what are notifications within the system? They're messages sent by the time and attendance system to selected people about different events in the system. Very broad, because there are a lot of different notifications we can configure. Things about timesheet data, things about accrual balances, pending time off requests, time clock alert notification, things that deal with FMLA or care points. So at this point, I'm going to jump over into the system, and then we'll go through how we set up notifications and then basically how to use them. So the first thing I wanted to walk through then is how do we actually set up the notifications so that we can use them. You will probably have to be some sort of administrator within your organization to have access to these pages. So if you are trying to follow along or doing this on your own afterwards and you come to a roadblock, reach out to support or your administrator for NovaTime within your organization to make sure you have the proper rights to the pages in order to activate it. So the first thing I'm going to head to is my little menu over here, company setup, and super admin is where we turn on and off. Once you do turn on the notification module here, you still need to reach out to support in order to turn on the background running of that module. Once it is configured here or turned on, you save the page, then you can start giving yourself access to that. So in order to give myself access to that page, I'm going to go back into the menu, access category, and then there's going to be two pages. We're going to start on the page menu. I'm going to click on my appropriate access group on the left-hand side, and then I'm going to go to the company setup, and then enable, which for me it already is enabled, all the way to the right-hand side, notifications. So this is going to make the page active to my login. And then in order to actually use it to its full capability, I'm going to go to page access. Make sure I'm on the company setup category at the top of the page, and then make sure that I have full access to that page. So once you enable the module, once you give yourself access to the page, and then once you give yourself full access to the page, then we can go and start configuring our notifications. In order to access that notification page, it's going to be housed under company setup, notifications. So there are a couple of different parts to actually creating the notification job. So I'm going to just start new, and that way we can see all our different event types. And I'm just going to briefly go through the main ones here to give you an idea of what they do and whether you need to configure them or not. So accruals here, this will allow you to get notifications when employees are reaching a maximum balance, should you have one on the accrual setup page. Approaching meal allows you to be notified when an employee has worked a certain number of hours on the timesheet and they should be approaching their meal deduction. Or I'm sorry, not meal deduction, but when they should be approaching the time they should punch out for their meal. Approaching overtime, this is going to allow you to be notified when an employee is approaching overtime for their pay cycle or when they've reached a certain threshold number of hours. Approaching scheduled days, so this can notify the employees when they've reached their limit to the number of days that they're being scheduled. Approaching total hours will notify the supervisor and or employee when an employee reaches a certain total number of hours on a timesheet. The big difference between the approaching total hours and the approaching overtime is that overtime is going to look at the hours that count toward overtime, typically like work hours, where approaching total hours can also include then time that's already on the timesheet for time off requests or holiday pay reaching that total number of hours. Entry screening is going to deal with our new care point for our time clocks. Kelly Day notifications. Kelly Days is a module on scheduling employees. It's just setting up different notifications for that one in particular. Missed schedule check-in. If an employee is scheduled to work and they have not checked in yet. No-show. So again, if the employee is scheduled to work and they have not punched in based off of their scheduled start time, it can send that notification out. Offline data collection. If you are utilizing time clocks, this can tell certain people when the time clock hasn't communicated to the software in a certain amount of time. Pending scheduler request here. This can be a secondary notification when there are pending time off requests in the system. So when the employee makes the initial request, it does send that email to whoever their approving supervisors are. This is in addition to that. So if you do need reminders, every day until the supervisor goes in and manages that pending request, this is an option you would select. Different system events. So timesheet status changes, you can be notified about that. Different timesheet exceptions. This is probably one of the most commonly used one. It can send notifications when different exceptions appear on the timesheet. Of course, these are things that you can see when you launch into the dashboard or see color-coded when you're actually on the timesheet itself. But this way, this would send a separate email to those supervisors or administrators, giving them a list of people who have that certain exception on the timesheet at that time frame. Timesheet pay codes. As different pay codes are being added onto the timesheet, this would then send the notification for that, letting them know that this has been added. Unapproved timesheets, it can send it to employees, supervisors, administrators, letting them know that timesheets are not in a certain status at a certain point in time. So when people do use this, I typically see they'll send one to the employee maybe Saturday morning saying, hey, your timesheet's not submitted yet. And then they'll have one starting maybe Sunday morning for the supervisors, giving them a list of people who they haven't approved yet, and then possibly like administrators or payroll administrators getting their own notification, maybe that following Monday giving them a whole list of who hasn't been approved yet. So you can set up multiple notifications using the same event type, and then just structuring the actual configuration of that notification differently. That's where the description kind of comes into play, because then you can say, unapproved timesheets for employees, unapproved timesheets for supervisors, unapproved timesheets for payroll administrators. And then you can doctor the setup for that. The last one here, unprinted point documents, is with our point system. If you do have the system generating documents based off of reaching certain point threshold, this is what's going to trigger the notification to the supervisors or administrators, letting them know that there are unprinted point documents. So basically a point document that hasn't been reviewed by the supervisor yet, that is just sitting out there. I am going to we're going to configure first an exception just because it gives us the most options. So I'm actually going to rename this and say this is Crystal's timesheet exceptions. The different scheduling types you may have seen change as I was changing the different event types. So there's auto. Sometimes it's grayed out if it's not option for this, which is what this is. Auto notification or schedule types will go out at midnight. So you don't get to configure when it gets to go out. It's just midnight every day. It's going to look at that notification and see if it's programmed to go out that day. Manual is another one. So that one, you actually get to configure the schedule period. I get to tell the system how often it's going to run. I get to tell the system what days of the week it should run. I get to tell the system when it starts running and then at what time of the day it should be sending those emails. And this here is going to be based off of Pacific time. So just keep in mind, if you're on the East Coast, you want to translate that number so that when it sends at 7 a.m. Pacific time, that's really going to be 10 a.m. Eastern time. One of the other ones you may have seen is, let me see if I can force it, probably not. Okay, one of the other types in there is going to be based off an event. So that means when it happens, send the notification. That one is most commonly when it comes to like the missed schedule or the no-show. So once the system recognizes the employee is not here, it's going to send that notification and not wait for a manual or scheduled event. Go back to timesheet exceptions. That's what I wanted. There we go. Okay. I do want this to be manual so I can control when it's going to send out to the people I program in the bottom. Let's say I don't want the emails going out on the weekends. My supervisors don't work weekends. I'm a Monday through Friday shop here, so I don't need that. So it's going to run Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I'm going to have the notifications start running, let's say 8 a.m. And I only want it to run once a day. So my interval is not going to be here because I'm not doing hourly. I'm doing daily or weekly. If I do want these to run every hour, then you'll be able to program how many hours it should run. I've seen people do the hourly, most commonly on timesheet status or timesheet approval ones, because sometimes you want to escalate it. You could have it running more often. But otherwise, just daily, weekly, it's going to run once on each day that you've checked mark at the time that you've indicated. If you want this notification to start in the future and not immediate, that's where the start date would come into play. Maybe I'm just setting it up now, but I actually don't want it to start until the week of the 24th. Then down below here in the additional data is where you get to program what this different notification is going to do. So in this case, I have a drop down here. What pay period are we going to be looking at when the notification verifies or validates this data? So let's say I want it to look at the current pay period. If you need one for the previous pay period for a certain exception, the current pay period for a whole slew of other exceptions, and then maybe just today for an absent, you can configure 3 separate exception notifications, programming them independently or individually for what you need. So every day, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. Pacific, it's going to look at the current pay period and then look to see which employees have these different type of exceptions. So I am going to check mark absent. I'm also going to check mark people who may have missing punches. And I think I will do that. That's all I really need to know. I need to know if there are absences on my timesheets according to the employee schedules, and then if there's a missing punch. Messaging detail is where you get to program who gets that notification. So first off, I definitely want to notify my supervisors. I get to put in the subject. So we're going to say, what are absence and missing punch timesheets. And then the below employees have an absent or missing punch on their timesheets. Please log in to review and correct. The system then is going to list out the employees and the day and the type of exception. I do have an example of this. I just have to bring it up here. Not it. This one. Okay. So here's an example of a missing punch notification. So it is going to, execute on a certain date. It's going to then give you that capability. So this first line here that says the employees below have a missing punch for the previous pay period. That's what I programmed the notification to read. And then I also added in the login information to get into the database from that notification directly. And then as you can see down here, the supervisor's ITP admin at that case, my employee happens to be called hourly rounding employee, and they have a missing punch on 6/11 of 2019. It's a very old notification. If we also want the employee to be notified about these notifications just so they know what's going on, you can program that as well. And if you have external email addresses. So the big thing here is that when it looks at the supervisor or administrator, whoever is listed in their send schedule approval request, it's looking at the email address you programmed for that user or for that supervisor. If you do need to send out to maybe like a general HR box or some other community box that you want that notification to be housed, and you can send it to there as well. You can also send text messages. So the same thing. Here's the external numbers, and then here's the prefix to the notification. And then down below is where I get to filter out the employees. So in this case, I may want it for my entire database. I'm not running it for just one department of employees. I say anybody who has an absent or a missing punch, their supervisor should be notified about it. Then I don't have to do anything down below. If I do want to program it to different departments, to maybe put on different wording in the email, then I can come in here and filter it. So let's actually run this for just one of my departments. So I'm going to head over to the right and click on filter for departments. And we're going to run this for recreation. And I'm good there. So at that point, I've configured it to what I need. I'm going to click save. Here it is on the left-hand side, so I can always come back and update this as necessary. And then once I save the page, it does create this event jobs. We're going to head to this page later, but once you do create it, it does add itself to this event job to let you know that it is going to be scheduled to run. Okay. So let's go in and build another one just to walk through this process with a different type of exception. So in this case, I'm going to hit new again. Let's do unapproved time off. That one is a popular one. There, here we go. Pending schedule requests. I'm going to call this unapproved time off. I want this to run not at midnight because that doesn't make sense. So I'm going to, for what I want, so I'm actually going to do manual so I can program it to run, again, Monday through Friday. And this time I want it to run around 10 a.m. Because that's when my supervisors usually get a chance to check their emails. And I want that to be one of the first things that they see at the top of their inbox. If it is important enough, maybe I want it to be notified every hour until my supervisor gets in there. Just keeping in mind, the more emails you send about the same thing, the more likely your supervisors might start ignoring them. So I'm going to notify my supervisors again. I'm going to, the message is going to be unapproved time off. Below employees have pending time off in the system. Use login and review and manage. Again, the system is going to fill in the gap underneath that with the supervisor's employees who have unapproved time off, or pending, I should say, pending time off in the system. Now, if that supervisor doesn't have any employees that have pending time off, it's going to just not email them at all. It's only going to be if that supervisor has pending time off. And it is going to look at the current pay period and into the future. So if my employee did request already a day in November and it's still pending, it's going to be part of this email. And then the same thing, if I wanted to filter it based off of my employees, I could do so, but I actually don't want to. I want all of my supervisors to get emails about their individual employees if they have pending time off. I'm actually going to change that word. And then I'm going to click save. Once you save it, you can come back in here and modify any part of this. If I do need to change the time frame or the days of the week, if I do want to restructure the messaging here, if I do want to start filtering this particular notification to just a select group of people, you can do that. If you don't want this notification to run at all anymore, there is a delete button at the top of the page. Keeping in mind that if the system has already created jobs for that, going into the future, we'll jump over that page. I'll show you how to remove it from there. But deleting it today would stop it from creating additional jobs. So basically, creating an event will create a job that tells the system when to run. And then we can always go in and delete those future jobs if we need to. Let's run one more, just because we're here and we have time. So let's do new. Let's do a no-show one. So in this case, I'm going to automatically do it based off of this. So let's see, we're going to execute notification jobs how many minutes after the scheduled start time. So let's say if my employee doesn't punch in 30 minutes after their scheduled start time, it's going to make this job run. Execute this notification job only for schedules that start at blank minutes, hours and minutes. Okay. So that just means that if you don't want notifications to be sent, like your third shift workers, if they aren't coming in to their supervisors, you can tell the system when not to run it. If you do leave it blank, it's just going to look at all of the schedules. And then I'm going to say my time zone. I happen to be in Central Time. I'm going to notify our supervisors. And then I can update down below. So in this case, this might be a part where maybe you don't want to know about no-shows for first and second shift, but you do need to be notified about third shift. You can come in here and then select the different filters and say, only notify me about people who belong to shift, let's say 4. And save. Now the last part in here is going to be the event jobs. So like I said before, when you do configure a notification, it does come over here and create an event job. So you'll see I had some already programmed in here, the unapproved timesheets. So it created a job in here. If I push this date range here, that's currently set to 110 to 113 forward. Got to search, sorry, all the way over here on the right. This page gets kind of big sometimes. No. It didn't do what I wanted. It should show us then our future scheduled ones, but we may not have any schedules for this. But this page will then show you what the event type is, the description that you programmed, so what's coming over here, the status of it, the parameters that you've set up. That's what makes this page kind of long. You can see the different parameters. When it's scheduled to run next, when it ran last, when it completed last, who created it. So if you do have multiple administrators with the capability of running notifications, you can see who ran it or who created it. The job log. So in this case, it's telling us how many time cards it processed for. So it looks like there wasn't any unapproved timesheets, so it didn't actually send any notifications this first line, but it did send it for 2 time cards out of the 2 available. And then over here on the right-hand side is the delete button. So if you do have other notifications that are saying scheduled, if you don't want those notifications to go out, you can always delete them. If I wanted to run this unapproved timesheets right now immediately without having to reconfigure anything on the actual notification configuration page, clicking on the status here, one that says completed or scheduled, will tell it to run immediately right now. So it actually creates itself. So here, job 66, it's now scheduled. And then it's running itself. So if I refresh, it's probably completed. Not yet. So let's see, it's set to run. Okay, it hasn't ran yet. I'm just going to refresh the page. And now it's completed. So that one I just told it to run, it was triggered. It ran, it completed, it gave me all of the information for that. And then it told me what it did. Okay. Now, if you do have a very large customer base, and I'm talking like over 1,000 employees, scheduling notifications to run kind of back to back can have them start overlapping, which can cause issues. So that way you may want to structure your notifications to have a little bit, maybe like give them each a half an hour to run before you schedule the next one, kind of thing. Okay. So just to recap what we went over today, we configured the notification engine. We came in and gave ourselves access to it, and then we came in and configured a couple of different notification types. And I'm just going to quickly go through it one more time just to give you the visual. To turn on the module itself, we're going to go to Company Setup, Super Admin. Again, if you do not have access to these pages, you will need to reach out to your NovaTime administrator or contact support if you are the NovaTime administrator for your organization. You will want to find the notification module, which will start here on the left. You'll want to activate it by moving it to the right. Once you save the page, you'll want to reach out to our support team to turn on the notifications in the background of the system to actually have it triggering and running. To give yourself access to the pages, access, and two sections. Page menu is going to give you access to the notifications page itself. Click on your appropriate access group on the left. Find the notification section here in Company Setup. Check it if it's not checked. Give yourself full access to the page by clicking on the Page Access tab at the top of the page. Clicking on Company Setup if it doesn't bring you there already. And then giving yourself full access to it. You may need to log out and log back in after you make this access change in order to actually see the page and have full access to it. Once you do that, then once you get into the system, notification is set up under Company Setup. And then there's a page in here called Notification. From here, you can then click on the different notification types on the left-hand side of the screen, and it'll bring you to what's programmed for that, which you can then always update as necessary. And then to start a new one, you click on New, select the event type, program as required, and then save. To delete a notification you no longer need, click on the item on the left-hand side so it launches the details for that notification. Click on Delete. If the system has already scheduled event jobs into the future, I do recommend coming into the event jobs page, seeing if there are any scheduled to run, and then using that delete button way on the right-hand side. It's kind of like if you've ever scheduled reports to automatically email out, it's kind of the same concept. Deleting the report may not cancel out any future scheduled tasks, and then you have the capability of coming in here and deleting those future scheduled tasks. And that's it for the notifications. We did kind of run through this, in the less of time that we have slotted for it. So if there are any questions or you want any more details on some of the pages I may have gone through or an event type, you can type that into the questions box and go to webinar toolbox.
So while we wait for those questions to come in, I do have a few that I do want to highlight. These were sent in during the registration process. Sarah asked, are notifications interactive? The answer to that one is they are not interactive. They're simply notifications that are allowing users to be notified or employees to be notified if there are exceptions, they're reaching a threshold, or hey, there's a timesheet, a deadline that's coming up. The other one that I have is from Alicia. She's asking, how do they help us save time? One of the examples that Crystal gave us today is, for example, the unapproved timesheets. Instead of having your payroll administrators run reports and look at which managers and how many timesheets are unapproved, you can have the system do that for you. As you can see on the screen on here, it can send out escalations where, hey, the payroll deadline for all timesheets need to be approved by 10 o'clock. And if it doesn't get addressed, we can send another escalation email to go out an hour later. That's sent out to the supervisors, and we can set up the triggers. Do we want to send those alerts prior to the payroll deadline, or is it on the day of, right? So that can help you save time in that aspect. The other thing that you can save time by using this particular module is your timesheet exceptions. Instead of it's a Monday morning, payroll is due, instead of your internal payroll teams having to track down those supervisors to address those missing punches or employees who are absent, you can have the system do that for you. And as Crystal said, you can have the system send these out every day of the week. You can have it set up. All right, I wanted to start at this particular time at 6 a.m. and then another one at 8 a.m. You can set up how often you want those alerts to go out, and then use the system to your advantage. Let the system work for you. And you can set up different filters where supervisors that are contacted are those that have non-exempt employees. So at the bottom, you'll notice that there's different filters, or if there is a particular location that is a problem child and you want to filter out that particular location, you can do that. Or you can just have the system send it out to, hey, all active employees who are non-exempt, who have exceptions, these need to be addressed. So that's another example of how you can save time. All right, Trisha also sent in a question and said, what are the common notifications that are normally set up? What we've seen is the timesheet exceptions, the timesheet pay code one. The unapproved timesheet one is very popular. And then the unprinted points documents, if you're using our point system, and approaching meals. So especially for those in California, if you're trying to avoid those meal penalties, you have the approaching meal where you can set up different parameters at 4 hours or at 5-hour mark. You want the system to alert you. You can set up those different parameters. And as always, the approaching overtime, maybe your department has a strict budget and we need to make sure everybody stays within those parameters. On the screen, you can see that you have the approaching overtime. And I think another popular one is the no-show. That could be very helpful for supervisors who have employees at different locations and they just want to keep track of what's happening. This will tell you who or which of your employees was out, and then you can work on scheduling and all the other great stuff. Okay. All right. Those are the questions that have come through so far, and I don't see any others on the question inbox. Just in closing, we would like to thank everyone for joining us today, and please take the opportunity to complete the short survey that we're going to be sending you. Your feedback helps us design what the future of webinars will look like. Everyone, thank you again for your time, your business, and we look forward to having you in our future webinars. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Crystal.